Welcome to Last in Line podcast, where we are highlighting, showcasing, and spotlighting great leaders of faith who have overcome adversity, cultivated resilience, and served others in a significant capacity. So settle in and be encouraged by this episode of Last in Line podcast. Gentlemen, I'm happy to bring back no stranger to Last in Line podcast, Mr. Matt Beaudreau, who, as you know, Matt is huge in the space of education and creating young heroes, as he calls them, and building young men, as well as the dads that lead those young men. He is a keynote speaker. He's a consultant. He's a coach, of course. He's spoken to companies like Lockheed Martin, Wells Fargo, Honeywell. He's spoken to the United States Air Force. He was high up in administration at Stanford University, won Corporate Trainer of the Year there. In 2017, though, Matt founded what's called Acton Academy, where he created it's basically placer schools, as he calls them, that utilize a Socratic method with emphasis on self-direction, cultivating confident, independent young people with a strong sense of character and personal responsibility. Those are some staples that make Matt who he is. He has since opened multiple campuses around the world. From that model and that experience, he and Tim Kennedy co-founded what's called Apogee Strong, where in 2021, where it's a mentorship program for young men between the ages of 12 and 22. They actually added one most recently for grown men who are trying to still find themselves and kind of walk in the fullness of what their calling is to lead young people. So I'm honored. I'm humbled. Matt's been on several big time podcasts, and he still comes over and honors us with his presence. And he's one of the more humble human beings I've ever met, with super vast range of talents. This guy, he's very smart. He's very capable physically, being mixed martial artist, very well qualified leader. So he fits right in here with what we're doing. So you're going to love this conversation, guys. We talk a lot about fatherhood, of course. We talk a lot about manhood and masculinity, not just maleness. And I love his perspective. He has got some deep thought. He's got deep perspective. Guys, you're going to walk away better today, thanks to Matt Beaudreau. Welcome him to Last in Line podcast. Matt Beaudreau, welcome back to Last in Line podcast. It's been a little bit, sir.
It has, sir, but it's an honor to be back. And anytime I get to speak with good men, it's a good day. So it's an honor.
Back at you. Listeners, you know who this is, but if you don't, and you've been living in a cave, come on out, join the rest of us, because I have higher regard for very few men than this guy right here. The respect is off the charts, and you could probably ask anybody that knows him, and they'd say the same thing. But Matt is big into creating what's real education supposed to look like, not schooling, with Apogee program and apogeestrong.com. And we're going to have links and everything, all the goods, to be able to harass him in the show notes. But man, you've been in Texas this week, and that's where I am, and we couldn't catch up in person, but we're going to. We made a promise to each other at some point. But talk about what you're most excited about in the season you're in right now, man.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate it. I can't wait to be able to connect. I got to see a bunch of guys in Dallas, a bunch of guys in Austin. And it was a jam-packed trip, so I can make it down to your neck of the woods here in this next time go around. Yeah. But the whole point of what we were doing down there is really about this next element of the journey. You know, we've had the Apogee Strong Young Men program that Tim and I created, and that's been rocking and rolling for a couple of years. We added the men's program in January, and we have almost 300 men currently that have been rocking here for these last few months, which is great. Wow. You know, phenomenal response. So part of the trip down there, you know, I wanted to see a couple buddies, Steve Weatherford and Nick Bear, and get to do some stuff with them, which is always fun. But it was to see some of my men that are in Dallas, some of my men that are in Austin, and then to meet with a couple of guys that are helping us kind of put everything together. We've been doing all this without any real tech. So we're combining all of this into one a new platform. There's going to be an app involved that just makes it easy, because a lot of what these guys are doing, man, as they're pushing through these projects and challenges is we've kind of gamified the process, and in that they can earn affiliation too. So a lot of these men are going to push through their own stuff this year and then turn around and partner with us to build out either their own coaching business for men or young men that's under our umbrella, or launch a school like what we're doing too. So we're going far and wide, man, because we need more good men out leading, and we're giving them the whole back end, the support, the tech, all of that they need to make it happen.
Yeah. Well, would you say that based on your initial vision of this program and its expansion, would you say it's actually exceeding what you guys had on a whiteboard somewhere?
Yeah, it very much is. And it's one of our slogans just for Apogee in general is fire, aim, ready. Right. And so what we mean by that is we see a need, and we're going to go ahead and find a solution for right now, knowing it's not going to be the end all be all solution. But what can we do right now? Because as soon as Tim and I sit down and start going, man, somebody should. Well, that's our cue, right? We don't live by the somebody should. We live by if it's worth talking about and there's a problem to be solved, what are we going to do to try to help fix it? And so we got the fire by putting the initial thing together, but as we're seeing what's working and what we want to tweak and what other avenues, well, then that allows us to aim a little more so that we can ultimately get to that ready. So yeah, this is far exceeding what we thought it would be, adding the men. We've got our first focus group for the ladies program coming up next week, is we'll be launching that as well. And
come on, man,
just going to get these affiliates going worldwide, man, so we can start putting some stuff in place.
That's great. And I think that actually that philosophy of fire, aim, ready would almost apply to getting kids maybe started out in life and starting a business, or, just picking something that they're really good at, that there's a need for, and they can align their gifts and talents with what's out there and needing, and then figure out how to make up money at it down the road. Like, just go do something that's meaningful and serves people, and you'll figure out how to tweak and how to refine and how to get laser focused in the areas you want to be. Would you agree with that?
Yes, sir. 100%. And the reality is it's the human design. It's the fire, aim, ready is what you do as a youngster, as a baby. That's your factory settings, man. You just go try, and you just keep going, right? You keep falling. You're learning to walk. You keep falling on your butt, keep falling on your butt, keep falling on your butt. And then eventually now you're taking some wobbly steps, and then those wobbly steps get sturdy, and then you start running. Right. And so again, that's our factory setting, man. And it's no different. You take your wobbly steps towards solving a problem. You fall on your butt over and over and over again. And as long as you got the right people around you cheering you on, it becomes a game of outlasting your own fears and outlasting other people's, negative input. It becomes a game of outlasting more than it does anything else. And
it is. It's a war of attrition sometimes. And I, like, to your point, I don't know many 1-year-olds that are sitting around looking across the room going, I don't have enough experience, or I'm afraid to fail, or I just see them getting up and going when they don't.
I better get a business plan together while I start trying to walk, right? And see if I can.
I'm not good at walking. I'm going to try this, and I know I'm not good at it, and I'm just going to keep doing it until it becomes a habit.
That's correct. That's correct.
So I like to do a little bit of dessert before dinner, and I like to get what maybe you want. What's a walk away win today for my listeners? If they just know just a tiny bit about Matt Beaudreau, you have an idea where we're going to go in this talk, but what is a walk away win for guys that go, man, I am glad I listened to that podcast with John and Matt?
That's a really good question, man. I like that. And I don't want it to, it's, the walk away win has zero to do with me. For the men that are listening, you getting out of your own way and not living in fear. I would have said, you caught me 6 months ago. I would have said, look, man, young people are capable. That's still a message, right? They're still more wildly capable than you can imagine. And we're chopping them off at the knees. And school is a big part of that problem. So you need to examine the why behind education, the why behind what you're doing with your young heroes. And once you start to dig into it and see that school wasn't meant for them, It's actually meant to go against them. Then you can start making a game plan around that. But I see the handicap that men have taken into their adulthood too. I see it more than ever. And you learning to get out of your own way as a man and stop operating out of fear is a needed thing.
That's so good. No, that's so good. I mean, that will never get old, and there'll never not be a need for someone to hear that. So yeah, if that's the one thing, which they're going to get about 25 other things from this, but that's a good one to walk away and actually be able to put a step in front of the other when we're done. It almost feels like we're neutering our kids' intellect whenever we're boxing them in. And we're going to talk more about education, your philosophy, some of the experience you had in higher education, being really high up at Stanford. I mean, that's not just a little small, nothing against tech schools, but that's a legit institution, and you were a decision maker and a leader there. But we're going to go into some of this. But I do have kind of a fun, quick fire scenario here that I wanted to throw at you. We're sitting around a coffee shop, you and some guys, and I want you to finish these statements here.
Sure.
This is you talking, and you're going to finish the sentence for me here.
Sure.
As a dad, I could be more intentional in the area of.
Oh, I really like that question.
Throwing hot ones early.
Well, that's great, because it is the question that I ask myself all the time. Which is why it's a hard question for me to answer, because
there might be more than one. Just pick one, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, but it's not, but the hardest part for me is I'm as intentional. I'll tell you what, for all my faults, and I am full of them, more so maybe than any of your listeners as well, man. I suck at a lot of things. I am very, very bad, very, very poor at a lot of things. Being a father is one thing that I think I'm wildly more intentional than 99% of men on the planet. And I don't say that to pat myself on the back. That is just my obsession. Is that intentionality with them. So,
well, what have you gotten more intentional at recently? Let's just say something good that you're doing.
I will say, one of the things that I've been most intentional about recently, so that's where I'm going to go with it.
Yeah,
is showing them the financial game. And what I mean by that is, one of the best ways we can continue to educate our own children at home is to continuously grow our own education and just bring them along, right? It doesn't have to be overly complicated. We need to get better, and then you bring them along. So we've been very intentional about everything from physical health to learning how to self-educate to taking on chores, responsibilities. All my kids have, I've got 3 kids, 12, 10, and 7. They've all started businesses and made good money. What I've been very intentional about recently is the financial game, and having them really watch the game that we play. I own nothing. Matt Beaudreau owns nothing. His wife owns nothing. We own 0 things. We have business trusts that own companies. We have business trusts that own family trusts. The family trusts own our farm. The family trusts own our vehicles. The family trusts own our equipment. All of those things flow into a 501c3 that we can then give. We're not paying, exorbitant amount of taxes to the government. We're taking that money that would normally go to the government in a legal structure, and we're giving it where we want to give it. We're helping the people we want to help. And it's not actually a complicated system. It only sounds complicated because, well, we're not taught that that's a legal system in this country. Right. And so that's what we've been intentional about lately, is bringing my kids in. So they go, okay, I'm going, all right, here's how the cash flow works for our companies. Here's how the cash flow works for our house. Here's what the P&L looks like. Here's how we operate with that. Here's the trust system. Here's the cash flow. And again, it's much more high level than they're going to be able to fully comprehend, but that doesn't matter. I want them to be familiar with it.
Yeah.
Because the more we're speaking that language, at some point it just clicks. And even saying this, most grownups are like, what are you talking about? Because we're not taught this. So that's what we've been most intentional about recently.
That's great. And I would assume you're going to incorporate that into some of your curriculum, if you haven't already, maybe some of that model a little bit. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a big part. Awesome. It's a big piece of what we talk about. And we talk about with our men too, right? With our dads. I'll tell you what. You've never seen more men on a screen with wide eyes when they're like, why do
I could do that? I can do that.
So I'm allowed to do that? That's a thing?
Yeah.
That's a thing,
I'm
right?
one
But
of those people. I could learn way more about that, which I may need to contact you on.
I'm
That's
telling you,
genius.
man, when you understand, and the reality is there's only about 200,000 people in our country that operate in this system. You got a 1040 system that most of us operate in, whether we're small business owners or not, right? If you're a W-2 employee or a small business owner, you're likely operating in the 1040 system and you're trying to maximize deductions and you're trying to,
Yeah.
right? There's also a 1041 system that
Mm.
is a completely different
Wow.
tax system, that is a legal system in this country. There are only about 200,000 people playing this game, and
Mm.
everybody's allowed to play it. Mostly it's only played by the ultra wealthy, the ultra quote unquote elite, right? I'm not ultra wealthy. I mean, we're fine, but I'm not ultra wealthy. That's not, but I understand that I'm allowed to play this game too. And we've
Nice.
set this up, and it is a game changer. So I'm
Nice.
intentional about my kids
Wow.
learning that.
Wow. That's good, man. I did not see that one coming.
Yeah.
That's a great twist to that. I love it. All right, got a couple more of these
Yes,
crazy ones
sir.
here.
Yes, sir.
This is you talking, so finish your own sentence. I hope my kids remember.
That their father loved them as much or more as any man that ever walked this friggin' planet. I want them to feel that legacy. I want them to have complete freaking peace that that was the case. I don't want them to be like, hey, you know, my dad worked really hard, but he did it for us. But right, I don't want any lingering like, but you know, I wish we got to see him more. But no, like I want them to be like that dad knocked it out of the freaking park more than anybody else because of how much he loved us.
So I have a caveat on that. I want you to maybe unpack that a little more because I would say 99% of dads would say those words,
Of course they would.
would want their kids to know they love them. But where is the disconnect?
Mm-hmm.
Why can't we actually, why wouldn't our kids actually say that about some of us in the scenario that you just gave? Like, because he's
Yeah.
never around or
Yeah. Well, there's a disconnect because there's too much of a disconnect, I think, between what men say they want and what they do to show that they want it. That's the biggest issue, right?
yeah.
Is men will get fired up. They'll say something. They'll even go as far as quoting all the right cliches and all the right
Mm-hmm.
phrases of whoever's popular. Discipline equals freedom, man, and go
Mm-hmm.
on more and go hard and go like we'll say all those things and get super fired up for 12 minutes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus 12 years.
Yeah.
They want the 10-minute fix versus the 10-year fix kind of
Mm.
deal.
Yeah.
And that's the natural state of man, I believe. Right? It's more it's more the rule than it is the exception, right? You go back and you take a look from a biblical standpoint. God
Mm-hmm.
himself brings all of these men out of slavery,
Mm-hmm.
right? He brings them out of slavery, man. They're now free. And what is the first thing they do? They go, God, you're too loud over
Complain.
here. This guy Moses that you brought us to rescue us, we want to kill him. We want to go resurrect this golden calf, and we want to get back to comfortable, right? So it's the rule more than it's the exception. And the men are going to turn their back on the long tail freedom plan that God Himself has for them. Well, they're sure as hell going to turn their back on whatever I'm saying or whatever anybody like. That's just the way
Yeah.
it's going to be, right? So
Yeah.
there is a massive disconnect between what men say they want and what they are willing to do
Yeah.
to ensure it. I look at every minute of my day and it needs to be invested, not wasted. There's no net neutral minutes. It's invested or it's wasted. And I
Yeah.
want my kids to be able to look and go, I can't see a wasted minute there. I can't see a wasted minute of that man's life.
That's great. That's awesome. And dude, I don't know if you have a book out or there's one probably in the works if there hasn't already been one.
I've
Yeah, you
got
do. Okay. Well, we won't
yeah,
open the
we're
can
working
of
on it.
worms
My brother,
unless
my
you
friend. Yeah, we got a friend, got a good friend that's a well-known guy, and we're working
Okay.
on that together. Yes, sir.
Okay, good. All right, here's one more, a couple more here. I look forward to the day when my kids.
Have kids. I
That's
look forward to
awesome.
it.
That's a
Yeah, I look
common
forward to
answer, honestly.
Is it?
That's a very
Yeah,
common
but
answer.
yeah, and I don't, and it's not just because grandkids sound cool, but it's because it'll be the first time they understand how much I love them, right?
Wow.
From an emotional standpoint. That's
Yeah.
why. Because they can only get it intellectually now. They can only get it based on the things that I'm doing, and they can put those, intellectual pieces together. But until you have kids of your own, you do not understand emotionally
So true.
how much your parents love you, right? And I don't think you can even start to understand God's love until you have your own. Again, intellectual is different than the emotional understanding. So that's my reason behind it, is because then they're like, oh man, he thinks about me like that.
Yeah. And even whenever they tell you stuff, or when the dad says things you don't want to hear, that's even out of love. They'll even understand that tough love stuff, that doesn't look all flashy and sexy. Wow, that's a great answer, bro. We could just stop right there. All right, how about this one? My kids, let's say, what would your kids say they're most proud of about you as a dad?
About me. I think it's something along the lines of not having any hypocrisy in the game, and really bringing them along for the ride. Like there's no hypocrisy. They know that what I say, I mean. They know there's not, they know I've never lied to them, and I'm not going to. And that includes, and again, wherever people go with this, do whatever you're going to do. I never tell anybody how to. But I mean, we don't do the Santa Claus thing. We don't do any of that stuff because in my mind, I don't ever want them to have a moment where they're like, but he did say this. Like, what else is he like tweaking the truth a little bit? You know what I mean? They know for a fact that what I say and what I do and that my word is my bond. So I think that's what they would.
That's good.
Respect.
No, I wouldn't expect a different answer from you on that either, because I could probably sit them down in separate rooms, and I don't know the ages, but even like I would say the older ones for sure. I mean, they would have a lot of the same. I guarantee you would say the same thing you just said, because they watch you and they hear you, and those things line up. What I'm watching and what I'm hearing line up. I mean, with a kid, if you can get there, man, that's half the battle.
It is, and they notice it. They might not, if you're a man that's living in integrity that way, and I hope everybody is.
Yeah.
Where they will notice it most is when they meet other people who are out of alignment with that integrity, because they'll go, oh my goodness. They'll go, that guy's not. And then they start to see that that's more the, again, that's more the rule, right? The dad's more the exception. And I'm not just talking to me, I'm talking to anybody who's living in integrity that way. And it just brings a different level of respect, I believe. And I love meeting good men, but I love meeting good men and meeting their wives and their kids too, because that tells the story, right? And the longer you can spend around men, and you can spend around their family too, you get a really good idea of who the man is, because you can't fake it.
That's right.
We were talking to, we bring on these mentors every week for the young men or for the men. And last night I had my men on. I literally flew in and landed, went to my daughter's gymnastics, my son's ninja, got back here to the house, ran back down here, and we had our men's call for the week last night. And we had Brandon the Truth Vera, mixed martial arts legend, Filipino action star. No, we had him on last night. He's a cool guy. But what was cool was during the call, his boy woke up. He lives in Guam, so it was a nighttime call for us. It was a morning call for him. He lives in Guam, and his little boy got up, and his wife was out taking classes. So he's like, man, I'm sorry. Do you mind if I take a break real quick and grab him to bring him? We're like, dude, bring him on the shit. Like, bring him on. He's a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, maybe. So he's like, yeah, all right, cool, man. So he goes and he gets him, and just watching as he's interacting with us, but also watching how easily it is that he interacts with him and how the young man responds. You learn more about Brandon Vera in that than anything else, right? The respect for the man was already there, but when you see that it wasn't something that could be faked with that 3, it was already established, right? That's it. I love seeing that from men.
That's so cool. That's so cool. Man. All right. So I guess for guys, like I said earlier, if they aren't 100% familiar or didn't listen to our last podcast, maybe give us an idea. Just kind of, you came up through the ranks in education. I don't know if you did some other things before or after that, but talk about your, I guess, the transition from different steps in education? Because you went up the ladder like crazy. And then sort of maybe a couple aha moments you had about the system on the way, and then maybe how you kind of jumped into this.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. So yeah, I recognized the game of education when I was a 4-year-old, 4.5, 5, right? So I very clearly remember, and that's one thing, again, I'm bad at most things. I have a few things that I'm good at and I've been good at that I believe are gifts from God. One of those is pattern recognition. I remember sitting at the table in kindergarten. So I was either 4.5 or 5 years old because I started early, and they had grouped us in colors, and we were going to do a reading exercise. And I remember very clearly being in the red group, and I remember looking around the classroom going, all right, that group over there, they think needs the most help from the adults. That's the next. We're the group they think this is the group of the best readers. Interesting, right? I remember very early on, and then I remember clearly again in 3rd grade. I remember being 8 years old going, I've got this game figured out. I'll get straight A's for the rest of my life, and I won't have to do a lick of work to do it because I know how to play the game. I remember clearly, and I did. I got straight A's the rest of the time, and I wasn't extraordinarily intelligent. I just knew the pattern and I knew the game. And so I focused on what every red-blooded young American dumb male will focus on is it's girls and sports, man. That was it, right? So I say that because that pattern recognition plays into later. So I actually graduated from college, and I had a job offer at the White House, and I had turned that down right before graduation. So yeah, I did work a couple of odd jobs for a couple of years, but those, oddly enough, led me to Stanford University. So, and it was just doing a good job where I was, meeting people, not knowing who it was that I was meeting, and then being ultimately recruited to 2 different companies, which led me to Stanford. So at Stanford, I started seeing patterns again. I saw patterns of extraordinarily smart young people who were extraordinarily stressed out, dysfunctional. And again, blanket statement. Of course, there are people there who are brilliant and also just socially crushing it. They're confident. Of course, those students are there. But I saw more of a high percentage of these young heroes that were struggling than I thought I should. And they were struggling with basic life, and they weren't struggling with OChem. They were struggling with life. And then so were their parents. And then I started to see this game play out in admissions at the university level. Everybody, I was always told it's a meritocracy. You go to school, you get your good grade, write a good essay, and then, right, and you hope that you get in there. Yeah, that's far from the truth. So that was one of the biggest ahas is I'm like, well, this is a game, and it's not a really cool game. There's not a lot of integrity around this game. I don't really love how this game is playing out. So naively, I thought I'd go fix it from the ground up, being a public school teacher. And you just see more of that game, right? So public school teacher, public school administrator, getting slapped on the hand for being creatively insubordinate. And then again, the next naive jump was going to private schools. Most private schools are just repeating public schools. And the biggest ahas came when I started asking why do we do school this way? And when you see where it came from and what the intent was, you realize from the word go, it has not been about children. It's been about obedience to the state. It's been about rolling over and handing over your sovereignty, and so that's why I decided to launch schools of my own.
Yeah, I got a question too, because there's a difference between kind of figuring out the system and getting sort of your own cheat code, like you say you did when you figured it out at an early age. But then there's a difference also in realizing that it's toxic and that it's contaminated. And did you have to get behind the curtain in education from inside the belly of the beast before you got that? Or did you sort of see that from outside before you ever became an educator?
I mean, I made the connection, right? I graduated from high school and went, cool, man, I got my straight A's, but I don't know
crap.
I don't know anything. I don't know what I know I'm good at sports and I'm good at girls. Like that's all I know. So I went, I guess I'll go to college because everybody says that's the next step.
Yeah.
Right. So then it was the same thing, man. It was the years of straight A's easily. I got better at sports. I got better at girls, and I was a moron. Then I was broke.
Okay.
And I had no idea, like I had nothing. So I knew that. I didn't necessarily put the connection together, but I knew that I had done all the right things and had nowhere to go and no idea of what I was going to do in the world, right? It was.
Yeah.
So then when I saw the game for what it was and really started asking the why, I went, well, of course I felt that way. So that's why everybody else feels this way too.
Yeah.
So, I need to start doing something to actually fit. I cannot be a part of it
Yeah.
because I can't look myself in the mirror, and I'm not going to change it. That was one of the things that I had to learn too, and the way I talk to people about it now, because people will push back. Yeah, but you should have stayed there and fought for it and tried to make change from the inside. And I applaud that thought. I applaud that mentality. And I want good people in those systems, because there are young people who are going to always and forever have to go there.
Yeah.
And those may be the best humans they ever meet. So I want good people there. But please understand, the system is designed for slavery and you cannot change it. I always tell people, you have just as much chance of going outside with a sign and go out and go pick it in front of the Vatican and tell them to change their theology.
There you go. Yeah. Or winning the lottery. No, I'm just kidding. Maybe
winning the lottery. It's about the same friggin' odds, man. It's not happening. Too much money, power, politics behind it, So
yeah. So, and I think I heard you say once before too, even though these kids come out with top educations, they're getting in interviews and hiring managers are going, what are they teaching these kids? Like, they come out and don't know how to speak, don't know how to shake a hand, don't know how to look somebody in the eye, don't know how to complete a sentence without a like or right? So just basic communication skills lack too.
They're mentally broken. A lot of them have learned to be entitled. They've never had to earn anything. There's a lack of resilience. Even though, they could be very good humans, and I'm not saying they're not.
Right.
But they are children.
Yeah.
Right. They're children.
22-year-old children. Yeah.
At 22, you should not be. And unfortunately, and I always say this, I know 12-year-old adults and I know 40-year-old children. And
that's right.
And unfortunately, the majority of them are children. And yeah, while I was building schools, I made all my money speaking and standing on these stages and talking to these companies. And that kind of organically took off, but it was also helping what we were doing on the school side, because I got to hear from all the execs at Amazon, Google, Netflix, Microsoft, Air Force, Lockheed Martin, American Eagle, Purina. I mean, these are all my clients, and they're all saying the same dang thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, I mean, I guess, so you've mentioned, I mean, there's no secret, this is a faith podcast and you're a man of faith. And I know that that's a big foundation for, driving you daily. What do you feel like maybe God is working on you right now the most in? Like, what is he trying to teach Matt Beaudreau that not necessarily a weakness, but it's an area you could be sharper? Is there something you feel like God's like, hey man, this is what I want to show you right now?
Well, there's no area that I can't be sharper.
Yeah,
that's
right.
That's the infinite game that I've come to embrace, right? And then come to really enjoy, is that I'm playing an infinite game until I'm 6 feet under.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful thing. A lot of people think it's an intimidating thing, it's a scary thing. I think it's a beautiful thing. I know how little I know how little I matter in the grand scheme of things, and I'm going to enjoy that ride, but right now, for me personally, one of the things that I'm coming to, I will say, I believe I understand this, and maybe this is God working on me about this, is that my job in the relationship between myself and God is more about listening than it is talking. And we get into this space as men, and the more men that I get to serve, the more I see this too, where it's, we like to say relationship, but our version of relationship is, I know enough about who he is as far as I can tell. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to stop pursuing him. I'm going to take everything that the quote unquote expert tells me at face value. And then the whole conversation piece will be me barfing at him, either praising him or telling him this is what I need. When 99% of the time we need to be quiet. We need to read what he actually wrote to us and let him speak to us that way. And we need to stop assuming that we know what we know. One of the exercises I take our men through is called steel manning their arguments for God. It's not, everybody knows the straw man logical fallacy. I want to steel man. I want to take a look at what you know, and I want to poke holes in it, because the more I do that for myself, and the reason this really started happening is because in the last 8-9 years, I've been diving into doing the best I can and working with some other people to help me, translating scripture from the oldest extant documents that we have, right? So translating from the Dead Sea Scrolls, translating the Hebrew for myself. And when you do that, what you realize is that there have been some alterations made in any version of the Bibles that we look at. There's been some things that have been slightly altered, left out, that you don't get as much context. You go read the NIV or the King James or whatever, and you start to read books like, Numbers or something, like you're like, oh, this is cool. Kill me now, right?
Yeah.
Like, what? I don't understand why this is it. Well, I'll tell you what, when you go dive into the Hebrew and you start to learn what is said there and the nuance for all these things, and you start to look at things in Paleo Hebrew where it's pictographs, and you start to go look at the same things, all of a sudden it is this new level of understanding. It's poetic. Wow. It's something that really gives you more about this infinite being that created everything. And I'll tell you, I've never gotten as much knowledge about him in any church, period, end of story. And that's not to knock people in church.
Sure.
It's not there. So, and I think awesome. You don't get that unless you're willing to pursue. So that's what I've been learning is, man, get after that pursuit. You don't just marry the woman and then go, cool, man, I got her. Now I'm going to kind of ignore her and just talk about my relationship. Man, I got to keep pursuing her if I want it to go well. God's no different.
Yeah. Great answer. I mean, that's just another level. Sounds like you realize that you got a lot more layers to peel back, and who doesn't when it comes to our spiritual life and strengthening and sharpening that sword. Golly, more fatherhood. And I apologize if it feels like we're playing pinball here conversationally, because I like going a little education, a little parenting, little education back and forth here. Because I believe it all obviously bleeds together somewhat.
Yes, sir.
I guess, you realized we had a system crisis and a schooling versus education crisis. When did you realize we had a fathering crisis? And when did you realize you needed to kind of get in the middle of that game and try to help serve?
That's a good question. So they do all bleed together, right? So one of the things that, as I started, you see it when it doesn't matter what level of schooling, whether I was running private schools, running public schools, doesn't matter. I mean, you see the element of how much the fathers matter. You see it while you're in that. You can point out the young men that don't have a father at home, or that have an abusive father, or that have a father who's physically there, but he's a child and he's not really present, or you see all of these different scenarios. So again, pattern recognition, you start to see the patterns. And I got to the point very early on that the more time I could spend with a young hero, it didn't take me very long to have a pretty decent idea of what's going on at home and who the parents are, right? It didn't take long at all. And now I've been with thousands upon thousands upon thousands of young people. So I've got a pretty decent idea. So one of the things that I wanted to bring to my schools that was a very different approach was I needed to pour into the parents as well, because I knew our schools, first of all, were already taking a different approach, and we were already giving much more trust to the young heroes. We were talking much more about growth mindset. We were, giving them hard, challenging things, a lot of responsibilities. There was a lot of different going on there that they weren't necessarily used to. So we knew we had to support the parents in this too. We had to support the parents to make sure they were okay with all this responsibility over here, but we also needed the language to sound the same at home, man. I can't talk growth mindset all day long to John, but then John goes home and his parents aren't rolling like that. Well, John ultimately is the one that loses because of that, right? Because his parents aren't on board. So one of the things we started doing was creating a bunch of events, meetings, conversations, trainings for the parents too. And as we started doing this more and more, I just got to see more often, like, man,
disconnect.
They need some, there's a lot of layers to peel back here, man. And it's not necessarily their fault. They grew up in this same system too. And there's a lot of layers to peel back, and they're still struggling with some of the stuff from their own parents. And they're still feeling like they're trying to find their place in this world. And they feel a lot of ways like they're still kids, and they're dealing with a lot of these traumatic things and are not sure how to deal with it. And culture sure as hell isn't telling them to do it the
Yeah.
right way. So there's a lot of work to be done. So we just started organically kind of creating this, and it was like, all right, man, well, you know what? Let's start doing this on a large scale, man.
Yeah, you got to bridge that gap. It doesn't do a whole lot of good to have the kids outrunning the parents. And like you
Right.
said, the terminology's got to line up, and
Right.
or it's just kind of bouncing off the ceiling. Well, I mean, so I I don't know your project, your curriculum, your
Yes,
process
sir.
with a fine-tooth comb, but I would imagine you talk about creating in a family unit this code of ethics, if you will, this standard, this maybe even a written family mission statement. Talk about your personal one for your family, and then maybe how much of an impact can that have in a family unit?
It is it's foundational, man. It truly is. And I want to bring it up let's see if I can show it here. We've got it. I'll show
Oh,
you,
there
man.
you
We got
go.
it framed we got it framed on our wall, right? I mean, it is a visual and it's in the most trafficked place in this house so that we're consistently looking at it and so that we're consistently talking about it because it is the foundation for moving forward. It is, we call it it's our family contract. It is what we are holding ourselves to as individuals, but it's what we hold each other to as well. And when I say hold each other, I mean hold each other. I mean, yeah, do I get to hold my kids to it? Of course I do. Do they get to hold me to it? Of course they do. And that's where the power is because I have to live it. It's no
Yeah.
longer this do as I say, not as I do. That doesn't work, man. That doesn't fly. And so, again, it's part of building that trust and that bond with the parents is that the kids are able to go, no, you guys have to live this too.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's what gets them inspired to do that. So I encourage everybody to have a mission like that, and that's part of all of our what we call the roadmaps for the young men as well as for the men, as for the dads. There's a version of this that pops
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. I think it's got to be impactful, especially when kids, I mean, you hear about adults having their dream board or their goal board, and they got pictures of boats and pictures of this and pictures of that. Cause they look at it, they can create a plan maybe around getting there, or at least at the very least, it gets them motivated and perspective on keep driving, keep driving. I think in the same way, like a kid sees that, every day, it's
Mm.
gonna, it's not going to take care of itself, but it is going to become part of their DNA. It's going to just
It
become
absolutely
who they
does.
are.
And we revisit it every week too,
Yeah.
right? We'll have our family meetings because again, this is not it's not a contract, on our wall that's like a to-do list. It's a to-be list, right?
Nice.
What that is. These are all values and they're character traits that we all say, no, let's live by this. And we check in every single week. How are we doing on all these?
Yeah.
Is there anywhere that you think we missed the ball? Is there any of these as a family we need to focus on this week? Is there any one of these you specifically want to focus on this week? And how can we help you focus on that? Why are you picking this one? We just a quick
Yeah.
check-in like that every week.
Yeah.
It just becomes ingrained. It becomes how it's the lens through which we
Yeah.
see the world.
Well, and so age specific, obviously, but do you make that list? Did you create the list organically just yourself, or is it something you kind of bring them in on the process
Yeah.
and like with your Apogee, your heroes you talk about? I mean, do they kind of get with their parents and be like, let's create this from scratch together?
They do. They create it together, and
That's
and we
great.
did the same too. At the
That's
time, my
great.
son was too young to really have any input, so he's the only one that didn't have any input on it.
Okay.
But he's just grown
Cool.
up with it. But my daughter's had input in there, and there's verbiage in there that's very specific to us. That means people go, well, send me your rules,
Right.
and I'm like, well, I can do that, but it's
Right.
not going to mean the same thing to you.
Yeah. That's
So
good.
they had input there. But yeah, I encourage the families to do it together so that there's
Yeah.
buy-in.
Skin in the game. Yeah, for
Yes,
sure.
sir.
Yep. Well, so you mentioned like obviously you saw firsthand maybe the separation, the disconnect, the chasm between fatherhood and education and fatherhood and kids and just getting that figured out in the family crisis, if you will, not just the father crisis, but the family dynamic crisis. I mean, it's rampant now all throughout our society. You're making a big splash, but yet there's so much work to be done, right? I mean,
Right.
you're expanding. I know you guys are growing and that kind of thing. I mean, what I don't even know if I have a question other than what is going to make the biggest dent in this issue?
Yeah, it's the discipleship model, man. And right.
Yeah.
And like that's why we're taking this. Because look, there's a lot of, you and I know a lot of guys in these spaces, right? We know a lot of guys in the quote unquote men's spaces. And I'd say any of them that are really making a dent, I'm friends with them and I love them dearly. And I highly recommend all of them. We didn't want to just recreate what anybody else is doing. We wanted to take a different approach because one, we're going to speak to a different, guy. Some guys are going to listen to me and then they're going to listen to, Mickler, and they're going to listen to Hagner, and they're going to listen to Kurt, and then they're going to listen, whatever. And they're going to vibe with a different person. Cool, man. If you're more of a different style, I will be the first one to tell you, man, Larry Hagner is one of the best dudes on the planet, and go over there to Dad Edge. I'll be one of the first guys on the planet to tell you that. I got no qualms, because you need to do the right thing. And if Larry is the guy that's going to get you to do the right thing and go lead your family, then do not come to me. Go to Larry if you like that, right? Like that's it. So for us, if it seems like, Tim and I are kind of your vibe, then I encourage guys to come in. But part of what we wanted to do is, again, we have a very specific roadmap. It's not a, hey, you just join and just stay forever. And we got a very specific roadmap. There is a ranking system involved in it. You're actually getting points and rank, like a belt rank, for putting in the work. The curriculum, so to speak, has not just been put together by Tim and I. We have gone to the best of the best of the best on the planet in very specific fields and said, okay, now you're in charge of thousands of men. What do they need to do to get better here? What do they need to know? What are the tasks, right? So we've got the best men in the world that are putting the projects together for their niche. So you've got a very different, every month is completely different as far as what you're focusing on, but you're focusing on your daily habits as well. Every week, we're also bringing in guys who are ninjas in these areas, right? We got, like I said, Brandon Vera was last night. We've had, Alex Hormozy came in and Chad Robichaud came in. And I mean, like the list goes on and on and on of just these amazing men to come in and pour in and go, look, this is where you got to go. And then once you've earned it, because you're transforming everything in your life by doing the work, it's the discipleship model. Now we're also going to give you, so to speak, like a business in a box, so to speak. What is your heart telling you? Do you want to go lead other men and use this roadmap here? And now you're going to go coach other men, maybe even locally, not even just virtual, locally in your community. And you're going to start leading there. Well, cool. Let's help you monetize that so that could become your thing, so that you can light other guys on fire to go do the same. Or, hey, you want to go do this for young men? Cool. Well, then let's give you that roadmap that we have got. Let's connect you here. Let's go business in a box. Boom. Now you can go coach these young men so we can perpetuate. Or, dude, you want to launch a school like ours?
Yeah.
Cool. Then let's go. We'll help you again on what that looks like. Back end support, affiliate support. Here you go. And you go bring one of these campuses to your community. Whatever we can do.
Wow.
Create disciples that are creating other disciples. That's how this spreads.
Yeah, that's exponential multiplication, and that's exactly how you make a dent. So what resistance have you felt, if any, from? I mean, I know Tim's in the spotlight from a national, worldwide standpoint, from like politics and just where he is and just his presence, his footprint. What are you guys feeling any of that, or are you guys flying under the radar? I mean, what if you can talk about any of it, like what's not classified?
There's pushback in a couple areas, but it's nothing that's been overwhelming. There's nothing that's been overwhelming yet. There's pushback on the education side for the schools that we build. Most of that pushback comes from teachers, which is kind of funny because they think we're anti-teacher or right, which nothing could be further from the truth. But without an understanding of what they are doing, like most teachers don't know why the system became the way it is. You're not taught that history. You're not taught to read John Taylor Gatto. You're not taught to read these people that will illuminate how the school system became, because if you were taught that, you would never enter it, right? So you just wouldn't, because then you would understand how it goes against actual human development. So, and some of them will still look at us as the enemy, versus anything else. So there's a
Well,
little pushback on that side. Go ahead.
yeah, I was going to say you've made an analogy before as kind of like processed food
Yes,
and
sir.
the zero nutrition that's in that, the conveyor belt that has to
Yes, sir.
manufacture the processed product, which
Correct.
is, am I right? You made this analogy before?
Yeah, that's absolutely it, man.
That's a little alarming.
It's very alarming, right? It's very
We're
alarming.
getting
And
processed humans, I guess.
that's it, man. That's it. And you can put a Michelin star chef in a McDonald's restaurant and just give him McDonald's ingredients. He might make it taste a little better, but he's still not going to make it good for you, right? And then in the whole point is these kids go through this for 12 years, and you could eat McDonald's every day for 12 years and you'd be alive. Would you be optimized though? Would your health be optimized? It's pretty obvious, no. And this is the same thing for the people that are in the camp of like, well, I went through and I turned out fine. Well, that's a problem.
Define fine. Maybe we have different
First of all,
definitions of fine.
fine sucks, right? Hey, John, how's your marriage? It's fine. Oh, okay. Sounds good, buddy.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what everybody wants, is a fine marriage and a fine existence. How's your job? Fine. How's your health? Fine.
Right.
F that. And for my own
That's
kids,
right.
dude, there's no way. I'm not shooting for fine. And are you fine because of or in spite of? I came out of school fine too, in spite of, not because of too. So
That's good, man. That's good. Because you mentioned too, you mentioned that it's harder to fix broken men than it is to build strong kids.
correct.
And
That's
so
right.
that's what we almost end up having, assuming they're even men at that age, which they're
Correct.
probably mostly not. But broken men are a product of the broken system, clearly.
Correct. Yep, you're correct. And I use this, and I think I actually posted something, might have been today on Instagram. I was talking about, I use the story or the metaphor of a elephant and how you train elephants, right?
Yeah.
And the way you train them is you take
Yeah.
them when they're a baby and you tie them up to that post, and
Yeah.
they can't physically. They know they shouldn't be tied up to the post, and they try everything they can do to physically rip it away, and then they realize they can't do it, and so they just acquiesce in their own mind, and they just go, okay, and they're broken at that point. And the sad thing is, you can take them back when they're an adult and tie a little tiny rope around them to the post. They could rip it right out, but they think they can't.
Yeah.
And that's what we are doing to, we have so many men who are these elephants who are just emotionally tied to that post. And the sad thing is, when it comes to school, they're also now tying their young ones to the post as early as they can, because they're told that that's where you're going to learn to be an elephant. All right. An elephant tied to a post is very different than an elephant who's just out in the wild being an elephant. Those are not
Yeah.
the same beasts, man. And so we're trying to untie these guys as early as possible. So,
Well, yeah.
we'll get pushback from them, and we'll get pushback from some of the quote unquote progressive organizations who don't like that we talk about men.
You can absolutely elaborate on here if you'd like, honestly. We all know what you mean, but go ahead.
Yeah, and the whole wokeness,
Yeah.
culture. We've had things that have been shut down. We've had things that have been we've had some of these bigger companies that wouldn't, and little things where they won't run certain ads, or they ban certain things, right? You get a little bit of that, but when you got some of these payment processors that shut down your event, refund hundreds of thousands of dollars to people at the last second, tell you you're no longer going to have access to your own money, and you don't have access to any payment processing, and there's stuff like that, which again, it's overcomable, but it still sucks. It's still a pain, and it's all because you're seen as a terrorist organization because you only speak about men. Okay, cool. Well, let's see if this happens too when we have our women's group up and running too, because really all we're talking about is traditional values, hard work, being good people, getting out and serving. That's what we're talking about.
Well, are you sure you can define what a woman is, Matt? I mean, are you sure? Because I don't know that we know, do we? I mean, we got Supreme Court people that can't define it. I don't know. What do you tell me?
And that's part of our problem. We have the gall to believe we can define it,
Oh, well, I mean, I wonder if you would get as much pushback if maybe, Tim didn't have such a stellar military resume, or I don't know, maybe because, if you weren't Lethal Weapon from an MMA standpoint, because I know you've been down that road. So, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I don't know. I wonder if you get so much if you guys weren't such a viable opponent in their mind. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, man. And
Or
and
you're
Tim,
having an impact. They don't like that. You're being
I
effective.
mean, there's no doubt about the impact, right? I'm not gonna,
Yeah.
and it's not as much of what we're doing as much as the people that are doing the work and seeing the fruit of it and then going out and telling others. Like that's where the
Yeah.
impact is. I'll give Tim, kudos because he's obviously in the public spotlight, far more than I am, and he does a really good job because he gets baited quite often. He and I went, we've done quite a few podcasts together,
Mm-hmm.
as well, and I remember going to one in particular, not too long ago together. It wasn't Fox, but it was Drinking Bros. We
Yeah.
were going on the Drinking Bros podcast, and good guys, man. It was cool. But he says right at the beginning, he's like, dude, you guys don't go down this specific road. Like there are certain things I can't talk about and can't dive into, and it's going to get me in trouble. And sure enough, they still went down it. Tim is a brilliant human, so he knows how to respond honestly and respectfully, but avoid getting himself in trouble. But it sucks to even have to do that,
Yeah, I can't imagine being a podcast host and being told ahead of time and then still doing it like that. That just seems like you're breaking the first rule of podcasting. But I guess when you're big enough, you can do what you want. You're safe here on this small little growing platform where we're just trying to do the good thing, encourage people and serve people. So you're safe here, man.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So we're going to get to this and land the plane for you because I know you're busy. But again, super gracious of you coming on, and I'm very grateful for that. My my oldest son is, for the love of coaching baseball,
Mm.
solely is a public school teacher. Okay, he teaches at a high school here. We're in Texas, thankfully, but still, we're not in a bubble. From all of the toxicity that's out there and the poison.
Sure.
But so he's, grown up in church. He is a big 2A guy. I mean, he's got plenty of protection and is like, you're preaching to the choir when you're talking to him. So
Yes,
he is in this beast. Okay. He's got a front row seat to all this. Do you have any advice? Because you can't just go quit tomorrow. I mean, that'd be ideal. And maybe someday he will, but he loves coaching so much. And if you saw him, he's a natural. He's right in the middle.
Yeah.
So what do you say to teachers who feel like they're right in the middle of God's gifting, doing what they're doing, and yet it's still what it is? You have any advice for them?
It's a great question, man. And I get it often, from the teachers themselves, right? It's a daily conversation. Man, I love what I do, but I see this for what it is. And at the end of the day, what I tell them is, well, do you have peace of mind? The reason I left, knowing that it wouldn't change, is because I also didn't have peace up here. I could not look at once I understood the system itself. And again, some of them are coming to me and I don't know if they understand even what they're asking. So they'll see the toxicity, maybe they'll see the agendas, they'll see, the broken homes, they'll see that. And sometimes they're just coming from that. And if that's all they're coming from, then I'm like, man, no, then let's lean into your gifting, man, and just go serve these kids.
Yeah.
If they come from the understanding of where school actually came from, I'm talking the Prussian military system that started because they lost to Napoleon Bonaparte. And the reason they said they lost was because their soldiers were thinking for themselves. So they had to make sure they developed a system that got people early on, young, so that they were blindly obedient to the state and would bend over backwards, right? When you understand that and you understand that there's actual harm being done to the human spirit, you will not have peace up here. And if that's the case, you need to find a way to still use your gifting in a different scenario. Go find a different place to coach in a capacity, or just figure out a way to just go. My good friend Zach Evanesh is an OG in the health and fitness space, and he now works for districts just as the strength and conditioning coach, and stays outside of everything else, right? Because it still allows him to coach and to gift and to pour into these kids, but not be dragged down and lose the peace of mind.
He's not the elephant anymore.
He's not the elephant. He can do what he needs to do and not perpetuate anything that he doesn't believe in and doesn't align with. That's
Yeah.
where I would go. If I was going to be in the system, I would figure out a way to make sure that I could coach, strength and condition, whatever that is, without having to play the rest of the game.
That's good. That's a good answer. And I think he can get to that. Obviously, he's brand new and he's young
Yep.
and he's probably figuring this stuff out gradually and a little bit feeling like it's insurmountable, this beast that he can't overthrow, right? But I also wonder, and this just came to me, what are your thoughts on this possibly being God's Trojan horse in a way of his people, faith people, Christian people, even though they're trying to get it out of the system and they've done a pretty good job? What about having more of those infiltrating the system, more of those Christian strong men who believe what we believe inside in the system? I don't know. What are your thoughts on that kind of being a Trojan horse from a Christian worldview standpoint and a man kind of teaching young men standpoint?
I don't know that I lean towards that's not the case.
Yeah,
I do. I wish I could say that. I wish I could say that I was, I'm extraordinary. I'm unshakably
sure.
optimistic as a human.
Yeah.
But I'm not optimistic about that. And
Okay.
it's, in my mind, it would be just as effective. And when I say effective, go ahead and put the air quotes around that,
Yeah.
is like you and I being like, all right, man, let's go. You know what, man, for the next 10 years, let's go hang out in prison and we're gonna be the light there and we're gonna change everything. No, you're not. We're just maybe gonna get killed. Prison's not gonna look any different, and we're losing all the real impact we can have outside. It's
Yeah. This
kind
tail's not going to wag this dog.
of,
Gotcha.
I unfortunately. So again, I want good humans in that system because
Sure.
those one-on-one relationships, please understand, I know how impactful those things are. And they're needed for these young people. But the long tail, slow drip of a game
Yep.
is it just
Yeah.
that's what takes root, man. That's what grabs. That's
Yeah.
what
You're
grabs.
right. You're right. I mean, you're most likely right. And then, so, okay. So how about advice for the parent, the two income household that can't
Yeah.
afford, I don't know, an Apogee program or can't afford private school
Yeah.
even?
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
Man, you talk about
Yep.
shackled and chained. What's your advice to make the best of that situation?
So I'll give it from specific past experience here, right? Because again, these are also people that I speak with on a
Yeah.
pretty close to daily basis. Right? I
Yeah.
get that as much as if anybody's ever reached out to me, man, I do my best. There's hundreds of messages that come through every day, and I do my best to get back to every single person, if I can help. There's a couple perspectives. Sometimes home education needs to be the way. Yes, I know both of you guys are working, but there are ways for many of these people that come to me to change their lifestyle,
Yep.
to have somebody stay back to be able to just be with the kids, right? There's
Yep.
that can be an option for some people, and only you who's listening knows if that's the reality, where it's like, okay, we could cut back here,
Yeah. Yeah.
could make this, we could sacrifice here, and that's your battle to fight. I'm not telling you have to do it. I'm just telling you that if that's a realistic thing,
Yeah.
don't sacrifice your kid to the altar of the Joneses, right?
Right.
So there's that scenario, that's potentially there. There's also the scenario of banding together with like-minded families and doing a rotating, like a home education co-op kind of deal, where it's like, yeah, man, I do
Mm.
work 5 days a week, but I'm off Wednesday and Thursday, and then
Mm.
John's off Friday and Saturday, and then Mike's off Sunday and Monday, and then, hey, like, you can band together, right, and get something where kids are rotating, but you're putting to something together in a small community kind of deal.
Have you
So
seen that? Have you seen that work?
I've
Oh, that's a
I've
great
seen
idea.
it. I've seen it work, but it's got to work around. So it's
It's a
nuanced,
great idea.
because what
Yeah.
happens is, if Matt has an idea of what it needs to look like, though, while everybody's together, and John has this idea, and Mike has this idea, and then we all don't have a through line on kind of what it needs to
Yeah.
look like, then it tends to break apart. But as
For
long as
sure.
everybody is essentially on the same page, then yes,
It's
it can
great.
work.
Cool.
It starts to get harder when you start talking single parent homes, right? And things
Mm.
like that. But what I tell people at that point then is, um, be honest with your heroes about the game that they are playing there, and make sure they get their education elsewhere. And I got that a little bit from a friend of mine named Patrick Bet David. who some people may know who he is, and another gentleman who's been a mentor to me named Seth Godin. Both of
Mm.
them have their kids in a kind of conveyor belt programs, and they're both very intentional about making sure the education was happening at home, and that their heroes understood the game that they were playing while they were at school. Meaning, man, go help somebody else. Do your best, but understand that you're there to do what you can do, but you're playing part of it as a game. Some of the stuff you're doing, you're not necessarily gonna learn. We're not worried about the grades, worried about the effort. Make good relationships there, though. Make relationships with teachers. Try to stand up for the right things. Stay out of the gossip. Stay out of
Yeah.
the stuff that young people get sucked into. Stay out of the stupid thing. Like, those aren't the relationships that are necessarily going to last unless you can find some good humans. And then when you get home, we're going to talk about finance, and we're going to talk about you building a business, and we're going to talk about you taking on a bunch of responsibilities and chores, and how can we go serve, and we're going to make sure that the education happens here. We're going to tackle deep books together and have great conversations around it. We're not going to write essays around it for the sake of writing an essay. We're going to have great conversations around it for the sake of actually getting out the lessons that we can have in these books. Make sure you can do that at home, and that they understand the game they're playing when they're gone.
That's real good. Yeah, that's a great. I mean, those are a couple of great ideas, because I think people throw in the towel when they come to the end and realize, well, kind of like my 5 or 6 Starbucks a week, and I kind of like my, golf outings a couple times a week, like kind of like that. So I don't know, or they just realize I just can't make it work. I think those are some great tips. Man, I appreciate you being on here. It's been awesome. Give me a snapshot kind of what you see. Give me 20 years down the road, a Matt Beaudreau crystal ball moment. 20 years down the road, what this, I don't know, I'm going to call it this, what this empire of Apogee is going to look like.
Yeah, 20 years down the road, I'm hopeful. Again, I don't have this legacy dream of, everybody knows my name. I'd rather Kaiser Soze out of that whole thing, where it's like, okay, everybody knows who he was and what he did and the impact. That's great, but we're not needing him or looking to him, to do anything, because everything is rock and roll.
Sure.
We still want to be able to do I still want to be able to help as many humans as possible. I want to be responsible at a lot of these live events and talking and traveling and serving.
Yeah.
But I want it to be this self-replicating beast where, the best example I can give is something like a CrossFit, right? Where it's this globally recognized brand, love it or hate it, you know what the brand is, and it changed fitness, right? So we want the same thing. We want people to 20 years from now, you're walking down the street and you see, the way a man's carrying himself, or you hear about a leader in the community and the way he's carrying himself, or the way this young man is carrying himself and working hard, and then you go, it's probably an Apogee guy. That's it. Like, it's that. It's a globally recognized household name that has brought character and values and morality and service, back to being mainstream and popular.
Do you have a quantifiable goal, like 100,000 schools by 2035, or I don't know what, is it that quantifiable, or?
We have not done that yet. And I don't know that we will. And I don't think,
maybe not.
I don't know that we will. And for a couple of different reasons. I don't know that we will, but
maybe you just get neck tats with the Apogee logo, so that we know when they're walking down the street.
That's it, man. Yeah,
that's an Apogee guy.
Or like right under the eye.
Just as long as we don't do teardrops. We can't do teardrops under the eye.
We'll just do the Apogee logo, and then
there you go. Well, man, I appreciate it. Give some heroes that might be in their young 20s, maybe transitioning out of college or into that next phase of adulthood life. My son's getting married in a couple of weeks, and so just give those heroes that you refer to. And I love that, because, man, you speak that over people and they will start to claim that identity. So give advice, maybe a parting shot for that group.
Yeah, for that group there, and they're that early 20s group. Cool.
Yep.
You can decide to be a grown-up at any time. It is literally a decision. You need to get out of the childhood ways. You need to take on as much responsibility as humanly possible at this age. This is when to do it. This is when to go back to that mentality you had when you were a baby, of just start wobbling and fall on your butt. And it's okay. Take on as much responsibility as humanly possible right now, before you have even more responsibilities that, you are
Yeah.
potentially losing something big. If you lose out on something, you'd be like, take on as much as you can right now, put away the freaking distractions, forget the video games, forget the swiping left and right. Get out there, take on responsibility, serve as many humans as you can. You do that for the next 10 years, you will be massively separated from the rest of your peers.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Tell us the website. Tell us where if we wanted to reach out with a question.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. So right now there's a temporary site of ApogeeStrongPrograms.com just to kind of point people. We're redoing the entire Apogee Strong website so that we have everything under one umbrella, the men's program, the young men's program, the 501c3, our foundation. So that'll ultimately be where to go. You can also check out ApogeeStrongFoundation.org for the 501c3 scholarships for young men to go through all these programs, have tuitions paid, things like that. So those are all places to go. You can check me out on my name on IG, Apogee Program on IG. And those are great places to ask questions too. Drop us a note in there or email me directly, man, Matt@ApogeeStrong.com.
Very good. Very good, man. You never disappoint, and you are very gracious for coming on again. Thank you for doing this. It's been gold. Even you always exceed expectations, and expectations are even high whenever you come on, and so you exceed those. So audience, with that, he's been Matt Beaudreau. We've been Last in Line. Be blessed.